We're live. Hello, James. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am also really well. Thank you. I'm privileged to be here with you today. The Dr. Rachel Hannam is obviously setting up for new premises, so she's been very busy. But this is a treat to get to know you. For our listeners, Dr. James Carroll is a psychologist at North Brisbane Psychologists. He comes with a wide range of experiences, including working in prisons. And we're here to hear his thoughts on how we work with anxiety. So welcome, James. And is there anything else to add to your introduction, seeing as we've only just met? Would you like to give us a little bit around your background and your interests?
Yeah, of course. I mean, how do I sum up, who I am in just a short amount of time? How does anyone sum up anyone in a short period of time? I'm James, one of the psychologists, obviously, but yeah, I have a real interest in sort of a few things. As you mentioned, I worked in prisons for about sort of 3 years, and did a lot of stuff in the space of substance use, psychosis, just emotional regulation. And that was a really rewarding experience that I knew I was interested in at the start, but it was never until I was there how much I realized how rewarding it was. But I've also got a big interest in sport and exercise psychology, which is actually what my master's was in, which I completed in 2020. Which is weird to say 2020 because it feels like it still is 2020 right now.
Yeah, no, that's gone.
Yeah. The pandemic has just really, warped my sense of time, and it feels like this is just a long version of that year.
Okay, so 2020, time stood still and we got stuck there. Yeah, the pandemic has certainly, marked that time. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so an interest in substance abuse and psychosis, but also in sports psychology.
Yeah. I feel very, like my interests are very opposite ends.
Well, sometimes that helps us to refine, what's common across a wide scope. So
Yeah.
really beautiful to have you here. To make sure that I think everybody knows what we're talking about when we speak about anxiety. Perhaps even more useful to our listeners than the APA definition would be how we recognise anxiety within our bodies. How do you notice it, James, when you feel anxious? What are some of your physiological, bodily, sensory experiences?
Yeah. Well, chronic anxiety is something that I've dealt with my whole life in a personal capacity. And it has, pardon me, it has really manifested in such a specific way. And it's always the sort of, shortness of breath. It's always the feeling like cramped in the abdomen, or feeling, sort of nauseous. Like they say butterflies in your stomach, but in my experience, it's like, a million birds flying around at 100 kilometers an hour.
Yes, from a yogic perspective, that's certainly where we operate, at the level of the diaphragm, and I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to that. And then what about in your clinical practice? What kind of ways do you see anxiety showing up at work?
Yeah. And it's interesting in practice because it doesn't always show up the same. No two clients can report it in the exact same way. And even though my personal experience with anxiety is like that, someone else's is going to be completely different. I've had a lot of clients report it as being really sort of, instead of body heavy, it's very mind heavy, where it feels like their thoughts are just racing around. Like, you see those like old time sort of circuses with the big the metal ball cage, and there's motorbikes running around inside. They've described it like that. I don't know the official title for those things, but it gave me a very vivid picture of what their anxiety is, coming out as.
Heavy, clunky, and recycling.
Yeah, and just loud.
Loud. Yes. So
Yeah.
a distraction, that resonates for me, a perpetual distraction, which is again my understanding of how some of the techniques that we'll be discussing can be so valuable. Before our conversation, James was talking to me about mindfulness, the practice of using the breath and using our awareness to ease anxiety. So we'll be certainly introducing some of those to you today. And James also has a really simple practice that you can use, especially if you're noticing some of those behaviours that may be a manifestation of anxiety, such as addictive behaviours. And James, you and I were talking earlier about even obsessive compulsive type thinking and manifestations. Would you like to tell us a bit more about some of those?
Yeah, of course. Obsessive compulsive sort of, behaviors and symptoms can be incredibly intense. Going back to my own and personal experience with anxiety is actually with obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's something that I know personally very well, unfortunately. But it's really helped me also understand the professional side of things, and what's the path forward when it feels like there is no path, or the path is so overgrown. But it breaks it down into obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions isn't the way you think it might be, in the fact that it's not just someone obsessing over a thing. Like if a kid gets a new toy, they might be really obsessed with that game or that toy, but it's not the same way. OCD, comes under the anxiety disorders, and it's really just a little bit more simple than that. And it's obsessions are the real sort of thoughts just going, over and over again, like, they're loud, they're fast, they're uncontrollable, they're uncomfortable, and they're distressing. The compulsions come in as a real physical sort of, this is my behavior to try and reduce the anxiety. This is, me trying to get some sort of control in the world to help bring that anxiety back down. And often they're things that don't really make sense. Like if, we're feeling anxious because there's a giant bear in front of us, well, we're going to run away. We're going to, get out of there. And then that action of running away is going to reduce the anxiety because suddenly we're away from the bear. But if my mind and the obsessive compulsive part comes in, it might say that, okay, well, I really fear bears and I want to avoid them, so I need to open and close my headphone case 4 times, like that, which is not connected in reality whatsoever. It doesn't define whether there's a bear around or not, but our mind tries to do that to reduce the anxiety and to, in a way, trying to reduce the threat of coming about, even though there was no evidence of the threat ever existing or being, real.
Okay. Yeah, this is interesting because you're reminding me that Rachel and I talk a lot about the value of our emotions as indicators of a need. So the need, obviously, in that survival situation is very clear, but in an everyday situation, my personal experience has been that emotions point to something underlying, a genuine need. So for example, it may be the need for safety. If I'm experiencing some sort of threat that's heightened my anxiety, but it may be subtler than that. It may be, the need for trust or belonging, or in some contexts, it may be the need for competence, for a certain level of skill or resourcing. And this again is how I've come to understand mindfulness as helpful to, rather than resist and try and suppress the anxiety or even kind of control and contain it, but to acknowledge it. Okay, here it is in my body. I can feel that tightening. I can feel that clenching. Okay, there's a reason here. There's something underlying. And if I can drop through it into a very felt experience, that there's something valid underneath there. I'm interested in your personal experience. Did you find there was something underlying that anxiety, that obsessive compulsiveness? Yeah, was that somewhere that you went? And I'm really ad-libbing here with you, James, so I hope you don't mind that we're going into new territory.
No, it's always welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the value of competence that you just mentioned is a really big one. And it's where my mind has always really grasped onto that competence or lack of feeling competent. Even though, you go out, you do these, qualifications, you get these certifications of, you're able to practice as a psychologist. The mind still ticks away in the background saying, okay, but what if? What if that, you actually didn't go and do that uni? What if, didn't really learn anything from it? It always ticks away with these sort of questions that just bite away at the feeling of being competent and the feeling of being, knowledgeable and being able to help.
So
So
are you saying that that's a driver to meet that need for competence?
yeah, totally. And you look at the logistics of it, and when you go through a very like CBT approach, you want to challenge the thoughts with evidence and logic. And you go, well, actually, there are, 7 years of uni behind that. There is a professional, registration body that governs all health practitioners. There is, insurances, there is, peer supervision, there is documents and real, evidence to support that, hey, actually, you are pretty competent, but your mind's just telling you you're not competent right now.
Great. I'd love to hear more about CBT and how you use it to work with anxiety. Do you have any practical application for our listeners in this area?
Of course, yeah. Avoidance is a massive thing in anxiety because our brain learns that anxiety hurts physically and it hurts mentally. So we learn that avoidance is a way to reduce the anxiety, but then we realize that our quality of life isn't, really where we wanted it to be, because we might be avoiding family, we might be avoiding social situations, we might be avoiding responsibilities at work, or things around the home. So things start to get away from us. We feel like we're not really connected to our environment or the people we care about the most. So one sort of real CBT strategy is that exposure to, the anxiety inducing events. If you're having a lot of anxiety around going outside, especially in the middle of a pandemic where, there's case numbers reported every single day, there's, real statistics that are just fueling that fire. Exposure of actually going outside, but importantly, when you do the exposure, to do some of those background, grounding techniques, using your breath, refocusing on what's important, having someone, you love and care about to support you physically through that, or, over the phone, to have that connection. Or also just using our senses to ground. We don't often think about, how do my feet feel in my shoes, or what can I smell, unless there's a giant sort of cup of coffee underneath our nose, or we've just taken our shoes off and then we feel the change. But really sort of instead of zoning out of those senses and feelings, we zone back in, and that allows us to then zone out of the really intrusive thoughts, or the catastrophizing thoughts that really occupy our mind.
Thank you for that reminder to zone in using the senses. One of my teachers has often said that the quickest way out of the mind is into the body. And I too, I love that sensory guidance. In fact, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear your guidance on that, if you'd be amenable to talking us through sensory guidance. And then we would love to open up to any questions and comments that our listeners might have. When you're ready, James, take
Cool.
it away. Yeah.
Yeah, happy for me just to run through just a like a really nice mindfulness. Um,
Be stunning. Yes.
cool.
Into
All
our
right.
Sunday afternoon chilled space. And
Sounds great.
practical tools that we can use this week. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely one that will be used this week. It's a brilliant one that I like to do on a regular basis. And, we're only human. We get out of, habit and practice pretty easily when life gets busy.
Oh,
So I like to bring this one back in. I try and do it every day before bed just to sort of center, my mind, calm my body, and just ease into the night to make sure that I can, provide the best situation possible to, get a positive and quality sleep for that night.
ah,
But yeah, I ask everyone to just sort of get comfortable in their chair or the couch or wherever, you're sort of seating or able to sit down. And we're going to start, and we're just going to really take a deep breath in through our nose as we close our eyes, and then we're going to breathe out through our mouth. Another deep breath in through the nose, and then letting it out through your mouth. And just one more deep breath. And letting it all out. And just let your breathing fall to a normal rhythm. Doesn't have to be super deep or super shallow, just wherever it falls naturally in this moment. I want you to turn your attention to the very tip of your nose, just focusing in on what the air feels like as it passes by. Noticing the sensations of temperature. Noticing the physical sensations of just the air passing by. Noticing the differences in the thickness of the air or the humidity of the air. And if any thoughts come up in this moment, it's okay. It's simply our brain doing what it does best, thinking about all the random and wonderful things that it wants to think about. But right now, we just want to gently bring it back into our breath. And we'll just tell our mind that we can give some space to those thoughts later on. Right now, we're just here. And we're just being present. We're going to observe and notice, really focus our attention in on the breath as it travels deep, deep down inside of our lungs. And we notice the muscles that are just helping us breathe. Not judging whether we're breathing from our abdomen or our chest, just noticing. Just noticing the muscles that are helping us as they flow and they sway. as the muscles build tension, and then all of that tension just lets go. Tension flows outwards with that breath. And if there's any other tension that's being stored in your body, just trying to let some of that go too. Might notice a buildup of tension in your back, your legs, your hands and feet, or in your neck and shoulders. We just want to let a little bit of that go. It's okay if some of that comes back. We simply just gently release it again. Before just taking another 2 or 3 deep breaths in through our nose and letting it all out through our mouth. And just letting that last bits of tension that are floating around out with it. Another deep breath in through our nose. And then out through our mouth. And then when we're ready, just bringing our attention back into the room. When we're ready, opening our eyes and being present in the moment.
That was wonderful. So simple. Don't forget how simple and accessible mindfulness is, you know.
Yeah. In my brain where
Go on.
in my brain where it's very busy all the time, it's nice to keep it simple and just sort of return to those basics. Otherwise, I find my mind really gets hung up on complexities and, oh, I should be doing this or I should be doing this. So, yeah, if it's simple and it works, it's beautiful. That's my motto with, just being present.
I think you may have just summed up one of the underlying enculturations of being hung up on complexities and, the need to get things right. And that shift alone, that acknowledgement that simplicity can bring us back down. That's certainly what I experienced, the simplicity and the spaciousness. Thank you for such a beautiful guidance. It's, you've just anchored that one for me. It was interesting as you were speaking, I noticed a definite dropping, and it reminded me of, why we talk about winding down, and grounding being this kind of lower center of gravity in contrast to the winding up, I felt a drop, even my face kind of dropped. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a good feeling when everything just sort of goes,
Yeah. Yeah, nice to know that we can support ourselves to do that very easily. Yeah. I'll just take a quick look at whether there's any comments or questions. So if you're listening, we would really love to hear from you, especially while we have James on board here and his expertise. Mia, hello Mia, good to have you here, darling. She says, it is also important to understand how anxiety shows up for yourself and have backup strategies when breath isn't working. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Grounding in the five senses. That's really beautiful, Mia. And she's given a definitive sequence there. She says this stopped working when anxiety has gone from 0 to 100. And it may spiral. Yeah. So she said that even like colouring can help to give some kind of focus, I'm imagining. Yes, focusing and overriding the obsessive thought loop. She says it can take hours to bring it down, but choosing the bright colours seems to help. And as I heard you say in our conversation earlier, James, Mia says that she begins to then take control over her anxiety rather than her anxiety taking control of her. Yeah, I think you used those very words earlier today.
Yeah, it's a very good description of it. The anxiety tries to just claw for that control, and it gives us so much relief when we're able to feel, a little bit more in control than the anxiety, has control of us. And on that note of, when one technique's quite, not really working, it's awesome to have a bit of a toolkit. I like to think of it as if, you're working on a car or you're doing some renos around the house, one screwdriver is not going to do every single job, just like breathing won't do every single job. But in the situations where it does work, it works brilliantly. Other situations, we might need a pair of pliers or a hammer. And that's why we build up our different sort of grounding techniques, our different sort of coping strategies, so that when one's not quite fitting and, doing what we had hoped to or need it to do in that moment, we've got, a multitude of other tools that can really just be switched out for the current one.
I like that. Yeah, the different tools to hand. Thank you, Mia, for reminding us that the drawing is obviously the visual and the focus. And I would have to agree that sometimes I have to really focus. If there's anxiety, the focusing itself, even if it doesn't feel like the practice is working initially, if I persist and I really just rein in my focus, that seems to be key, rather than expecting the practice is just going to magically clear it away. Yeah.
If only. If only.
If only, yes. And Teresa says that she likes the permission to do this exercise that you've just guided, James. The permission to do it, even if it's not done perfectly.
Yeah.
That was a really lovely reminder. So we are, for once, actually on time. So that is really great. And especially, Mia says that self-exploration to build your toolkit and not being afraid to explore has obviously been important for her too.
Totally, yeah.
So James, really great to have you on the show. And we'd love to have you back again. And so hopefully we'll see you, some more on these events. And also we'd love to see you at some of our in-person events. The community meet here in Graceville once a month. It's the last Sunday of the month, which is coming up next Sunday. And it's an opportunity for everyone to get together in person and apply some of these practices. And we top and tail every session with some mindful breathing, sometimes with some movement practice. And Rachel will be talking on nonviolent communication, which is her precious baby, and very much aligned, with what we've spoken about today.
Yeah.
We would love to see you there, James. And if you'd like to facilitate something sometime, that would be even better. Yeah,
no, sounds brilliant.
Beautiful. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Ciao. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.